Okay, I'm back. Let's see, picking up where we left off, we drop into the control loop that's generated for us. You automatically have the close window event, and like I've already mentioned, he calls the component close. Everything is funneled close-wise through him. He lists off the stuff up here. Let's see, we have the list icon components that we have. We have the text boxes. Looks like I didn't rename the description text, but oh well. So he gives you some options inside here, pretty standard stuff actually. Strings, strings he actually calls a function to select all. So when somebody clicks inside a string, the whole thing is selected. That's only good for Windows, and that's another function that's over there in static. Let's see. On button add, he didn't know what to do, so he gave us the left click, but he didn't know what to fill it in with. The button save, he sure as did know what to do with that. He calls the component save function or procedure. So all of that's cool. We're going to eventually modify this to make him call the create. But for the moment, I'm just going through the code of what is generated for us. So let's quickly jump through these. This isn't rocket science. So on the create, we bring in our defined variable from the top of the form. If I come up here, remember we have our defined workship components reference here. And then he comes in down here. What we do is initialize him to new. And this is a function we'll get to later. And then he calls our component set screen. So that's really all he does. Modify. Modify comes in. He also has a handle to the variable. He calls the find function, which is on our database sheet, and feeds him the key to find and hands him a reference to the object. So he goes off and loads it, and then he turns around and calls set screen. Next, we get to the delete function. Delete needs the index of what is selected for deletion. And he doesn't need that to find the record since the ID to the record is passed in, but we need that for, again, it goes back to we have a list that's displaying the collection of records that is this table. We need to know what record is selected so we can delete that off should you decide to delete. So what we do is we go find the record. Then we come in here and ask the question, delete confirmation. Are you sure you want to delete this? The answers are yes and no. If you click yes, then we come into this if sentence here. That doesn't look quite lined up properly, but we remove the, first we come into here and say, okay, we are deleting. If the delete is successful, delete functions on the database layer actually have a delete validate step that has to be passed. So if it passes that, then it will delete. Otherwise, it's going to kick back a false. So we only want to delete it if the delete function is successful. Then we will remove the gadget item from the list. And then we will select the next record that we have. Okay, so this is calling the next selection of the next record in on the list. Okay, so that brings us up to save. I'm going to jump over set data because save is going to pick it up for me. So we'll slide down a little bit. Let's go ahead and expand the save. There we go. Okay, so when we save, we hit the save button on the screen. Control loop calls us down to save. We bring in a reference to our object. We look at the state of the record because if you've created a new record and save it, we have to add it to the grid. If you merely modified a record that already existed, then we need to update the existing record. So that's why we're looking at the state of the record. And I'll go into state more when we get to the database layer. That's an automatic field that's added to all tables. So first, anyhow, that gets us to the protected state here of getting the state of the object itself. Then we call set data. Well, set data, as I've explained, is where we take all the screen values that are on the screen that the person has filled in or chosen to select and change and loads them back into the object. Once again, this goes back to your code when you were putting in the name field and referencing it to string name. That's where this information comes from. So you can see that we convert size back to a value. So the integer size can be saved properly in the database. Type is out here. And we pick up the item data of the selected item of the combo box. So that gets saved back to the database. We don't save the actual name. That would be absurd. So anyhow, once that's all done, we've reloaded our object. We then will call the save function on the database object, pass it a reference to our object, and say, hey, did you successfully save him? First step in the save routine is go validate this. If that passes, then it will do either a SQL insert or it will do a SQL update, again, depending on state and knowing whether it's new or I guess the other answer would be that it's actually dirty. So we'll get into all of those on probably the next video. So when this is all done, we go ahead and call the close component, which in turn comes up to our last function here. And in this particular object, we don't have any real housekeeping other than to say, turn our value to true, because we're repeating until. We turn him to true, which automatically closes the screen and returns us back to where we were called from. So that covers all of the code that is generated for behind the form. Now, I wanted to just throw in a caveat here that you can choose to use this or you can choose not to. It's up to you. It can still save you time in that once you've created your database, you have all the functions and calls necessary to load from an object, load the object, to load the screen, whatever you're doing. You don't have to use this screen. You can build your own. Let ClassBuilder build this, grab the pieces you want to use out of it, and not have to write it from scratch. But that's a personal call on your end. What I'm trying to do is make the code accessible and you understand what the code's doing to where you can choose to use it or not. And that finishes the review of the code behind form.